What to do, YouTube? This is Acidic Roots. So this is Acidic Roots on Frenchy Talents YouTube. And basically, I'm going to talk about the Paul Whelan situation. Put basically like a commercial kind of landscape, comedic kind of commercial landscape on the Paul Whelan situation as to how that happened. It's happy hour, and I figured we'd get to some of these type things. So basically, Paul Whelan had been in prison for like a spy sting. He had went to a wedding. He had went to a friend's wedding out in Russia in particular, and he happened to get arrested from an old friend of his from Russia. As far as that particularly kind of went, he wound up with 16 years in prison. As far as that kind of goes, so just look after being able to say Paul Whelan was a staff sergeant in the military, some of that type fare as far as that particular kind of happens with it. And this is just like a real life episode of CSI, I'd have to say. It's just a real good pitch to kind of get that when you think of like the CSI show, some of those type fares as far as that particular kind of goes. This is just probably the stuff that they get their basis from. Just being able to say that CSI is probably making all this money, just being able to say, but it's just off of things that real life kind of happen. These sorts of stings, some of those aspects. This really feels like an episode of Miami Vice, I'd have to say. It's kind of a basic concept, and it's not exactly like a Welcome to Russia kind of brochure, I'd have to say, just about that in particular. When you think of like certain situations, it's like kind of coming to Russia and some person, like some tour director or something like that, saying, "Welcome to Russia, now get the fuck away from me, go get sick off of rat poison, and go curl up in a ditch somewhere," just something like that in particular. I'd have to say in particular, not exactly the friendliest type brochure, I'd have to say in particular. What was that noise? What a punk. But yeah, Paul Whelan was probably watching like Yakov Smirnoff on TV, something like that, eating popcorn and just on the television in the hotel as far as that particular kind of went. Because he got arrested. When he got arrested, he was just in a hotel, something like that. Yakov Smirnoff was probably on TV, something like that, just saying something like, "In Soviet Russia, popcorn eats you." Just some of those type jokes. It's being able to say as far as that kind of goes. It's probably watching Russian comedians, Russian television, just wondering about that, seeing like the concepts of it, and then just happen to kind of be the thing. But I definitely feel like Paul Whelan deserves like a military discount. I think that military discount should be like a universal thing in terms of like the service. I think that's pretty universal. Is just talking about the military. I definitely think the Russians believe in the military and have a pretty leather laden kind of military as far as that particular kind of goes. So I just would have to say it's pretty universal to say that he was like a staff sergeant, but just like that, just being able to say that he deserves some degree of military discount, probably more than 15, 25%. You'd think that 15%, 25% is kind of a decent military discount, but definitely in exchange for the service of just the commute of being in the military is kind of the concept about it, just having like that relative respect just in balance to the military as far as that particular kind of goes. The ironic thing about it is he seemed to like Russia when his friend wanted to get him to host a wedding in Russia as far as that particular kind of went. He was going there to get married. It's the basic concept about it in particular. This is pretty bad for business, I'd have to say, for Russia. This is kind of the concept. It's definitely a clear sign saying, "Hey, don't get married in Russia. We don't want you here." And maybe we're only in it for the money. This kind of happens to be the concept. Definitely, I just wonder the sheer amount of folks who are getting married in Russia nowadays, as far as that particular kind of goes, and the tourism that's kind of going along for us. I realize that there's a war going on currently in Russia and pitches like that. You probably wouldn't want to deal with those aspects as far as that kind of goes, but it just seems like it's bad for business in terms of getting some income. There's no money to casinos coming in and bars and some of those type places. The shindigs is for places like that and honeymoons and some of those type things in particular as far as that would kind of go. So it just feels like just a giant red flag as far as saying, "Hey, you pretty much don't want to come here." Just the ironic thing about it is it seemed like Whelan kind of liked Russia just within that relative pitch because he knew so much about it. This is kind of the thing. But so yeah, that's the basic concept about Paul Whelan in Russia. I'd have to say, just being able to say he's in prison for 16 years. He's been there for at least six, as far or 5.5, as far as that particular kind of goes. Just would have to say it's definitely kind of a foul situation. Probably something that needs to be rectified in pitches like that. I'd have to suppose in particular, but just a little broadcast, little humoristic type bit to kind of get just within these aspects of broadening like the horizons of some of this type of stuff to make some noise about getting him more in the motion of getting him out of that particular situation.